The lion, which should have been a threat, became a living wall. It lay beside the woman, not to attack her, but to protect her. Its warm body radiated vital heat against the night's cold, and its deep roar, which once announced danger, was now a solemn warning to any threat that dared approach. The beast, instinctive and protective, guarded the fragile caretaker, defying the cruelty that had abandoned her. The highway, once a stage for human indifference, became the sanctuary of a wild gratitude where justice, silent and powerful, began to weave its own destiny. Dawn advanced, cold and relentless, but beneath the beast's protective mantle, an unexpected warmth persisted. The lion, majestic and wild, maintained its unwavering guard. Its body, a muscular, golden mass, was the only shield between the fragility of the unconscious caretaker and the biting indifference of the highway. Every hair, every fiber of its being seemed to vibrate with a primal determination, a silent vow forged in gratitude and memory. The deep roar it emitted was not of a hunt, but of warning, an ancestral echo that resonated in the darkness, alerting any creature, human or otherwise, that dared disturb that improvised sanctuary. Its amber eyes, once observing the world through zoo bars, now swept the desolate landscape with fierce intensity, registering every dancing shadow, every whisper of the wind, every distant light approaching on the horizon. The woman, still unconscious, breathed shallowly, her pale face contrasting with the dark, dense mane surrounding her. Her scent, a unique blend of soft soap, earth, and something more indescribable, perhaps the aroma of genuine kindness, was the beacon that guided the lion. It was the same scent that for years had calmed it, fed it, made it feel safe even in captivity. It was the scent of the one who saw it not just as a caged beast, but as a being worthy of affection and respect. The highway, meanwhile, continued its intermittent flow. Distant headlights emerged like curious eyes in the night, their beams sweeping the scene for moments before disappearing into the darkness. Most drivers rushing on their journeys barely noticed the anomaly by the roadside. A dark shape, perhaps a hit animal, they thought, and drove on, indifferent to the silent miracle unfolding. But then, a pair of headlights approached more slowly, the rumble of a heavy truck engine breaking the night's monotony. The lion felt the vibration in the asphalt even before seeing the intense light. Its muscles tensed, a low, guttural growl escaping its throat. It adjusted its position, its body even more protective over the woman, its eyes fixed on the approaching threat. The truck, a giant of metal and speed, slowed down, and the sound of pneumatic brakes hissed in the cold air. A man, a truck driver with a face marked by fatigue and curiosity, peered out the window. His eyes, initially confused, widened in disbelief. There it was, by the roadside, an unconscious woman, and a lion, a real lion, wild and imposing, lying beside her like a guard dog. The truck driver blinked, rubbed his eyes, trying to discern if fatigue was playing tricks on him. But the image remained, vivid and impossible. The lion, for its part, did not move. Its posture was clear. It was not a threat to the woman, but to anyone who dared approach her. Its eyes now were two burning embers fixed on the truck, communicating an unequivocal message of warning. The truck driver, caught between shock and the instinct to help, turned off the engine, the sudden silence seeming to amplify the beast's low, continuous growl. He knew he couldn't just get out of the truck. That animal didn't look like a domesticated circus animal. There was an aura of power and danger radiating from it, even in its protective stance. But the woman, she was in danger, and the night's cold was unforgiving. The lion, sensing the man's hesitation, let out a stronger roar, a sound that made the truck driver instinctively retreat back into the cab. It was a warning, a boundary not to be crossed. The beast was not just protecting the woman from the cold and loneliness, it was protecting her from the world, from the same world that had abandoned her there, defenseless. As the truck driver pondered his options, the lion lowered its head, gently nudging its muzzle against the woman's hand. A surprising gesture of tenderness, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that bound them. It felt the faint pulse beneath her skin, the shallow breath, and an even greater urgency ignited in its eyes. It didn't know what human help was, but it knew it couldn't allow anyone to hurt her again. The highway, once a stage of indifference, was now a silent battlefield where the loyalty of a beast was the only hope for a human life, and the fate of both hung in the balance, observed by an astonished and helpless truck driver. The truck driver, a man named Jorge, felt cold sweat trickle down his forehead despite the icy pre-dawn air. His eyes, accustomed to monotonous landscapes and the hypnotic glow of road lights, now fixed on the surreal scene before him. A woman, fragile and inert, and a lion. Not an escaped circus lion, but a creature of wild power whose presence radiated unquestionable authority. The roar the beast had let out moments earlier still echoed in his ears, a primal warning that kept him paralyzed inside the cab of his heavy Scania. Jorge tried to rationalize. Perhaps it was a trick of light, a delusion of fatigue. But the image did not dissipate. The lion, with its dark and imposing mane, was there, real, alive, and unequivocally protective. He saw the animal's gesture, its muzzle nudging the woman's hand, and a shiver ran down his spine. That was not a hungry predator. It was something far more complex, something that defied his entire understanding of the animal world. The woman needed help. The night's cold was a silent, relentless enemy. But how to approach? How to convince a wild lion to relinquish its guard? Jorge knew that any sudden movement, any attempt at intervention, could be interpreted as a threat. And a threat to whom? To the woman, or to the lion itself, which seemed to have taken responsibility for her? With trembling hands, Jorge grabbed his CB radio, then his cell phone. Who to call? The police? The fire department? Animal control? How would he describe the situation without sounding like a lunatic? Hello, I'm on the highway, kilometer such and such, and there's a lion protecting an unconscious woman. The phrase sounded ridiculous, but it was the plain truth. He dialed 911, his voice choked with disbelief. I need help. Urgent. On the highway, there's a woman and a lion. The operator, accustomed to all kinds of emergency calls, seemed confused. A lion, sir? Are you sure? Jorge took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. Yes, a lion. Big, wild, and it won't let me get near the woman. While waiting for confirmation that help was on the way, Jorge couldn't look away. The lion, for its part, kept its eyes on the truck. Its amber eyes, which had previously swept the darkness, were now fixed on Jorge, a golden, relentless sentinel. Every fiber of its being seemed to say, "Do not approach. She is my responsibility." The urgency he felt grew with each passing minute. The caretaker's scent, now mixed with the cold and dampness of dawn, seemed fainter, more distant. He needed to keep her warm, protected. Minutes dragged like hours. Jorge saw blue and red lights flashing on the distant horizon, growing rapidly. The sound of sirens, initially a distant wail, transformed into a shrill howl that tore through the night's silence. A police cruiser, and right behind it, an ambulance were approaching. The lion sensed the change in the environment. The air vibrated with the new threat, the scent of different humans, the metallic and shrill sound approaching. Its muscles tensed even further. A deep, continuous growl emerged from its throat, a clear warning that its guard would not be broken. It adjusted its position, its massive body forming an even more impenetrable barrier over the woman. The emergency vehicles stopped at a safe distance, their headlights blinding the darkness. Two police officers with bulletproof vests and weapons drawn exited the cruiser, followed by two paramedics from the ambulance. Their faces, illuminated by the flashing lights, displayed a mixture of shock and disbelief. But what? one of the officers murmured, his voice choked. The scene was unbelievable. An unconscious woman and a wild lion acting as a guardian. "It's true, I swear!" Jorge shouted from the truck cab, his hands raised in surrender. "He wouldn't let me get near her." The lion, sensing the approach of the new intruders, let out a roar that made the ground tremble. It was not a hunting roar, but one of pure warning, a sound that reverberated through the deserted highway, echoing the fury and determination of a beast that would not back down. Its eyes now were golden flames, fixed on the men who dared approach. It didn't know what they wanted, but it knew their presence posed a danger to the caretaker. It would protect her, no matter the cost. The highway, once a sanctuary of wild gratitude, now transformed into a tense standoff, where the woman's life depended on the understanding and caution of humans confronted with the inexplicable and on the unwavering loyalty of a beast. Time was running out, and with each second, the caretaker's life hung by a thinner thread. The lion's roar, a primal thunder that tore through the dawn, silenced the sirens and made the hearts of the men on the highway pound. It was not just a sound. It was a declaration, an unbreakable boundary, a warning that the woman's life now belonged to its keeping. The police officers, trained to face urban dangers, had never encountered anything like this. Their weapons, once symbols of authority, seemed insignificant before the wild majesty rising by the roadside. Sergeant Mendez, the more experienced of the pair, lowered his weapon, but kept it at the ready. His eyes swept the scene, trying to process the impossible. A lion, free, protective, and an unconscious woman. He gestured to the paramedics, who retreated further behind the ambulance, their first aid kits seeming useless against that barrier of flesh and fury. "Jorge, can you give us more details?" Mendez shouted to the truck driver, who was still in the cab, his voice muffled by the radio. "How long has he been there? Did he do anything to her?" "No, sir. He's protecting her. Since I stopped, he hasn't left her side. And he wouldn't let me get near her," Jorge replied, his voice trembling. He nudged her with his muzzle as if he knew her. Mendez exchanged a look with his partner, the young officer Silva, who looked pale under the siren lights. "A lion protecting a woman. That's unprecedented," Silva murmured, his voice almost a whisper. The lion, oblivious to the conversation, kept its amber eyes fixed on the intruders. Every muscle in its body was tense, ready for action. It smelled the caretaker, fainter now, and a pang of animal desperation spurred it on. It had found her, protected her from the cold and darkness, and now these new humans, noisy and threatening, wanted to take her from it. No, it would not allow it. The lion's mind, though instinctive, operated with singular clarity. That scent, that gentle touch, were living memories of a time when it was not just a caged beast, but a cared-for, loved being. The caretaker was its anchor in a world of bars and strangers. And now she was weak, vulnerable, and it was her only defense. Mendez grabbed the radio, his voice firm despite the surreal situation. "Central, we need specialized support. Animal control team, veterinarian, and maybe a helicopter with spotlights. We have a wild lion protecting an unconscious victim on Highway X, Kilometer Y. I repeat, a lion, wild." The dispatcher's response came with a mixture of skepticism and urgency. "Sergeant, confirm the information. A lion?" "Affirmative, Central. It's real. And he doesn't seem friendly with us. The woman needs urgent attention, but we can't get close." As the emergency bureaucracy unfolded, time became an enemy as relentless as the pre-dawn cold. The temperature continued to drop, and the caretaker's shallow breathing was a constant reminder of the urgency. The paramedics, helpless, watched from a distance, their equipment ready, but unreachable. "Sergeant, we can't wait much longer," said one of the paramedics, his face serious. "She could be hypothermic, in addition to whatever made her pass out." Every minute counts. Mendez nodded, frustration evident on his face. He knew, but what to do? Shooting the lion was the last option, and one he wanted to avoid at all costs. The animal was not attacking, it was defending. There was a wild dignity in its posture that prevented him from seeing it merely as a threat to be eliminated. "Let's try a slow approach," Mendez decided, signaling to Silva. "Slow movements, no threats, just to assess her situation." Silva swallowed hard, but obeyed. The two officers began to advance, one step at a time, their weapons pointed at the ground, their eyes fixed on the lion. The night silence was broken only by the rustle of their uniforms and the beast's low, continuous growl. The lion felt the approach, its eyes narrowed, pupils dilating slightly. The scent of the men, a mixture of sweat, metal, and fear, invaded its nostrils. It didn't see them as saviors, but as potential predators threatening its treasure. The growl intensified, transforming into a guttural warning that vibrated in the air. When Mendez was about 10 meters from the woman, the lion made its move. It wasn't a full attack, but a rapid advance, a warning lunge that brought it within a few meters of the officers. Its claws, though not exposed, seemed ready to tear. The accompanying roar was deafening, a sound that made the officers stop abruptly, the instinct for self-preservation overcoming any courage. "Back off! Back off!" Mendez shouted, and he and Silva took quick steps backward, returning to a safe distance. The lion, satisfied with having established its limit, returned to its protective position over the woman, its eyes still fixed on them, the message clear: do not dare. Jorge, in the truck cab, watched the scene with his heart in his throat. He never imagined he would witness something so surreal, so primal. The lion's loyalty was palpable, almost visible in the cold pre-dawn air. But the woman, she was growing paler by the minute. Police dispatch informed them that the animal control team was on its way, but it would take at least 30 minutes to arrive. 30 minutes. On a cold night, for an unconscious person, 30 minutes could be an eternity. The lion, for its part, lowered its head again, nudging its muzzle against the caretaker's hand. It felt the warmth diminish, life slipping away. A low, almost inaudible lament escaped its throat. It didn't understand human medicine, but it understood the fragility of life. It would protect her from the cold, the wind, the men. But how to protect her from what was consuming her from within? Its eyes swept the highway again, searching for something, anything that could help. The gratitude it felt for that woman was a fire burning in its chest, stronger than any hunting instinct, more powerful than any fear. It was the guardian, and its vigil would continue, unwavering until its last breath, or until true help arrived, help that it, in its animal wisdom, still couldn't discern. The highway, now bathed in the intermittent light of sirens, was the stage for a silent drama, where life and death danced around a beast and its caretaker, and time, cruel and relentless, continued to tick. Dawn advanced, and with it the cold intensified, biting exposed skin and seeping into clothes. The highway, once a stage of silence and stars, was now a scene of flashing lights and palpable tension. 30 minutes. That was the deadline. A time that felt like an eternity for the unconscious woman, and an unbearable burden for the men watching her from a distance. Sergeant Mendez felt the weight of responsibility crushing him. His experience had taught him to deal with criminals, accidents, even natural disasters. But a wild lion acting as a guardian was something that escaped any procedure manual. He observed the beast, imposing and majestic, and the woman under its protection. With each passing minute, the caretaker's pallor deepened, and the paramedics' concern became more evident. "Sergeant, she's becoming hypothermic," the paramedic's voice, now more urgent, cut through the air. "We need to act. If we can't stabilize her soon, it will be too late." Mendez knew. He could see the woman's shallow breathing, the slight tremor on her lips. The lion, for its part, seemed to sense the change. Its body, once a static wall, now exhibited a slight tremor. A low sound, almost a lament, escaped its throat, different from a warning roar. It was a sound of anguish, of a creature that felt life slipping from its protected one, but didn't know how to intervene. The lion's amber eyes swept over the humans again, not with initial fury, but with a mixture of distrust and a strange plea. Did it want help? Or did it just want them to stop threatening its treasure? The line was thin and the risk immense. Central, any news from the animal control team? Mendez asked into the radio, his voice harsher than he intended. Sergeant, they're 15 minutes away now. City traffic is complicated, but they're speeding up, came the reply. 15 minutes. Half the time had already elapsed, and the woman's situation only worsened. Mendez looked at Silva, the young officer, who kept his weapon lowered, but his eyes fixed on the lion. Fear was visible on his face, but also a hint of fascination. Silva, we need something to cover her. A thermal blanket, anything. But how are we going to do that? Mendez murmured, more to himself. The lion, as if understanding the intention, growled again, a clear warning. It would not allow anything to come between it and the caretaker. Its loyalty was absolute, but its understanding of human needs was limited. It would warm her with its own body, if it could, but the pre-dawn cold was relentless. Jorge, the truck driver, still in the cab, watched the scene with a mixture of horror and admiration. He had seen many things on the road, but never anything like this. The connection between the beast and the woman was undeniable, almost mystical. He picked up his cell phone, hesitant. Should he film? No, that seemed disrespectful, almost profane. But the story was so unbelievable that no one would believe it without proof. He lowered the phone. That woman's life was more important than any viral video. Mendez tried a new approach. He took off his bulletproof vest, leaving it on the ground, and raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Hey, boy," he said, his voice soft, trying to project calm. "We just want to help. She's cold. We need to cover her." The lion tilted its head, its eyes fixed on Mendez. The growl subsided but did not cease. It seemed to ponder, its animal mind processing the body language and tone of voice, but the instinct to protect was stronger than any attempt at communication. It took a step to the side, exposing the woman a little more, but keeping her under its protective shadow. Was it an invitation or a challenge? One of the paramedics, seeing a glimmer of opportunity, grabbed a silver thermal blanket and took a cautious step out of the ambulance. "Sergeant, I can try, if I go very slowly." Mendez hesitated. It was an enormous risk. One wrong move, and the lion could attack. But time was running out. Go. But if he makes any aggressive move, retreat immediately. Don't risk your life. The paramedic, a brave man with years of emergency experience, began to advance. One step at a time, the thermal blanket extended in his hands. The rustle of the plastic in the cold air was the only sound besides the lion's low growl. Each step was an eternity. The officers, their weapons still lowered, watched with their hearts in their throats. Jorge held his breath. The lion watched the paramedic with terrifying intensity. Its amber eyes followed every movement, every tremor. When the paramedic was about 5 meters away, the lion raised its head, letting out a roar that was not of full fury, but of an unmistakable warning. A roar that said, "This is the limit. Advance no further." "Back off, Doctor!" Mendez shouted, his voice tense. "It's not worth the risk." The paramedic, his heart pounding, retreated slowly, his eyes fixed on the lion until he was back in the safety of the ambulance. Frustration was palpable in the air. They were so close, yet so far. The lion, for its part, returned to its position, lowering its head over the woman, nudging its muzzle into her tangled hair. It seemed exhausted, but its guard was unwavering. It felt the cold, her weakness. A flash of memory, quick as lightning, crossed its mind. The gentle touch of that hand, the familiar scent of soap and affection, the sound of the voice that calmed it on stormy nights. It didn't know what hypothermia was, but it knew she was in danger. And it, the great lion, was her only hope. Time continued to drain away, mercilessly. The distant sirens of the animal control team began to approach, a new sound in the pre-dawn chorus. But for the caretaker, every second was a battle against cold and unconsciousness. And for the lion, a solitary, desperate vigil. The highway, now bathed in the intermittent light of sirens, was the stage for a silent drama, where life and death danced around a beast and its caretaker, and time, cruel and relentless, continued to tick. The sirens of the animal control team tore through the mantle of dawn, a sound that promised a solution, but which in reality only added another layer of unpredictability to the drama. The specialized vehicles, large and imposing, with their visible grills and equipment, burst onto the scene, bathing the highway with blue and red lights that danced over the motionless figure of the woman and her feline guardian. Their arrival did not lessen the tension. On the contrary, it intensified it. Sergeant Mendez felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Finally, professionals trained to deal with wild beasts. But the situation there was anything but wild in the common sense. It was a story of loyalty, of a bond that defied logic and biology. The leader of the animal control team, a robust and calm man named Dr. Elias, stepped out of his vehicle with a briefcase and an analytical gaze. He was no stranger to dangerous animal situations, but the scene before him was unique. An adult African lion, majestic and terrifying, protecting an unconscious woman as if she were its cub. "What's the situation, Sergeant?" Dr. Elias asked, his voice grave and controlled, as his eyes swept over the lion, the woman, and the surroundings. He noted the caretaker's pallor, her shallow breathing, her slightly bluish lips. Severe hypothermia. Mendez explained the sequence of events: the frustrated rescue attempt, the lion's refusal to allow any approach. "He's not aggressive without provocation, Doctor, but he won't let anyone get near her. He seems protective." Dr. Elias nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the lion. The beast, for its part, had noticed the arrival of the new intruders. Its growls, once low and mournful, now became deeper and more menacing. It raised its head, its amber eyes fixed on the group of strangers, especially on the equipment that looked like weapons. The scent of adrenaline and metal, mixed with the disinfectant odor of the vehicles, was a warning sign for its primal instincts. "He's stressed, but he doesn't seem to be in hunting mode," Dr. Elias murmured to his team, who were already preparing tranquilizer darts and containment nets. "The priority is the woman. She doesn't have much time." The containment team, accustomed to dealing with escaped or aggressive animals, faced an ethical and practical dilemma. Shooting a dart at the lion was the standard solution, but the risk of hitting the woman, or of the lion reacting violently before the tranquilizer took effect, was unacceptable. Furthermore, the lion's position, hunched over her, made a clean shot difficult. "We can't risk a dart now," Dr. Elias decided. "If he moves abruptly, he could injure her further, and the tranquilizer's onset time isn't immediate. We need a distraction, something to draw him away from her, even for a few seconds." As they deliberated, the woman's condition visibly worsened. The paramedic, now beside Mendez, pointed to the portable monitor. "Sergeant, her temperature continues to drop. Her heartbeats are weak. If we can't warm her in the next 5 to 10 minutes, it will be irreversible." 5 to 10 minutes. The countdown became a hammer pounding in everyone's heads. The lion, as if understanding the urgency, let out an even louder lament, a sound that seemed to echo the pain and helplessness of the humans. It nudged its muzzle against the woman's face again, a desperate gesture of affection. In its animal mind, it felt her life draining away, her warmth diminishing, her familiar scent weakening. It had protected her from everything it saw as an external threat, but it couldn't protect her from the invisible enemy consuming her from within. A flash of memory, more vivid than the previous ones, crossed the lion's mind. Her hand, not just stroking its fur, but holding a small vial, applying a balm to an old wound on its paw. The soft scent of the balm, the delicacy of the touch, her voice murmuring words of comfort. It remembered the pain diminishing. The feeling of safety. She healed it, and now it couldn't heal her. Dr. Elias, observing the interaction, noticed the change in the lion's behavior. It wasn't just protection. It was something deeper. "He has a bond with her," he said, more to himself. "He's not a common wild animal that got lost. He knows her." This perception, though crucial, didn't solve the immediate problem. The woman was dying. "We need a plan B, and fast," Mendez insisted. "We can't wait for him to decide to move away." One of the containment team members, a younger veterinarian named Leo, had an idea. "Doctor, what if we try with a sound? Something he recognizes, perhaps, or a scent that draws him away?" Dr. Elias considered the suggestion. A sound. Maybe. But what? And a scent. What would we have here that would attract a lion? Jorge, the truck driver, who had left his cab and was approaching cautiously, overheard the conversation. "I have fresh meat in my cooler, doctor, for my lunch. It's a big piece of picanha." Everyone looked at Jorge. The idea was risky, almost ridiculous, but the situation was desperate. "Picanha," Dr. Elias repeated, an eyebrow raised. "It could be a distraction, but we need something more. Something that will draw him away from her long enough for the medical team to act." The lion, as if sensing the change in the atmosphere, the growing desperation, let out a low, prolonged roar. It was not an attack roar, but one of deep anguish, a primal lament that sent shivers down everyone's spines. It was losing her. It knew. Dr. Elias looked at the woman, then at the lion, and a dangerous idea, but perhaps the only one, began to form in his mind. "We need a volunteer, someone who can get close enough to place the thermal blanket on her while we try to distract him with the meat. But this person needs to be fast and aware of the risk." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with fear and hesitation. No one wanted to volunteer to approach a protective lion. The paramedic who had tried before shook his head. "Doctor, he won't allow it. I was 5 meters away and he roared. Any closer movement and he attacks." Mendez watched the lion, the woman, and the containment team. The caretaker's life hung by a thread. He felt a lump in his throat. That lion, which should have been a threat, was in fact a desperate guardian. It didn't want to hurt anyone, only to protect, but its protection was, paradoxically, killing the woman it loved. "I'll do it," an unexpected voice cut through the air. It was Jorge, the truck driver. "I'm not a doctor or a police officer, but I can't just stand by and watch her die. I'll take the meat. If he approaches me, maybe you'll have a chance to get to her." Everyone looked at Jorge, surprised. A truck driver, a civilian, volunteering for a suicidal task. Dr. Elias hesitated, but time was running out. "It's an enormous risk, sir," Dr. Elias warned. "He could attack you. He's a wild animal." "I know," Jorge replied, his voice firm, though his face was pale. "But I can't just stand by. Someone has to do something." Mendez looked at Jorge, an ordinary man transformed into a hero by extraordinary circumstances. He saw the determination in the truck driver's eyes. "Okay, Jorge," Dr. Elias said, his voice now more urgent. "Get the meat. Sergeant, prepare your team to cover Jorge if necessary, and paramedic, be ready to run as soon as we have an opening. This is our only chance. The plan was reckless, desperate, but it was the only one they had. Jorge went to his truck, grabbed the piece of picanha, the smell of fresh meat already spreading in the air. The lion, as if sensing the new scent, raised its head, its nostrils dilating. A new hope, tenuous and dangerous, hung over the highway, while the caretaker's life, hung by a thread, and time, relentless, continued to tick. The stage was set for a final confrontation between animal instinct, human bravery, and the coldness of death. The highway, once a stage of silent desperation, now pulsed with a tense, contained energy. Jorge, the truck driver, held the piece of picanha as if it were an explosive device, the rich, ferrous smell of raw meat already spreading in the icy pre-dawn air. Every step he took toward the lion was a challenge to his own courage, an act of blind faith in the possibility that a primal instinct could overcome an inexplicable bond. His eyes were fixed on the lion, which in turn had noticed the change in the atmosphere. The great feline's nostrils flared, catching the unmistakable aroma. It was a powerful, ancestral scent that awakened something deep within it. But the hunting instinct, the desire for meat, clashed with the urgency of its vigil. The woman, her scent faint and dying, was still its priority. Its growls, once of anguish, now carried a note of confusion, of an animal dilemma. Jorge advanced, slow, deliberate, every muscle in his body tense. The piece of picanha was his only weapon, his only hope. Dr. Elias and Sergeant Mendez watched, their hearts pounding erratically, ready to act, but unable to interfere without worsening the situation. The paramedic, thermal blanket in hand, was crouched, ready for the run of his life. 5 meters from the lion, Jorge stopped. The feline raised its head, its amber eyes fixed on the truck driver, then on the meat. A tremor ran through its powerful body. It was hunger, temptation, but it did not move away from the woman. Its loyalty was stronger than the lure of the meat, at least for now. "Now, Jorge," Dr. Elias whispered, his voice almost inaudible. With a quick, calculated movement, Jorge threw the picanha. Not directly at the lion, but about 10 meters away, to the side of the highway. In a darker area, further from the woman, the piece of meat spun in the air before landing softly on the grass. The sound of impact was almost inaudible, but the scent intensified. The lion, for an instant, hesitated. Its eyes moved from the woman to the meat and back to the woman. It was an internal battle, visible in every fiber of its being. Her life was draining away, it could feel it. But hunger, the promise of energy, was a powerful call. Then, with a low growl and surprising agility for its size, the lion stood up. It didn't run directly for the meat, but took a few hesitant steps, its head turned back, as if wanting to make sure the woman was still there, still safe. It didn't want to abandon her, but the urgency of the meat was irresistible. It was the window they needed. "Go now!" Dr. Elias shouted, his voice tearing through the silence. The paramedic, a young and athletic man, sprinted. In a matter of seconds, he was beside the caretaker, his body hunched over her, the thermal blanket already being unrolled. The containment team, with tranquilizer darts ready, kept the lion in their sights, but the priority was the woman. The lion, realizing the invasion, let out a furious roar. It had been tricked. The meat was a distraction, a ruse. Its fury was palpable, a tremor that made the ground vibrate. It turned, ready to attack, to protect its caretaker, its friend. But the paramedic was already there, the thermal blanket enveloping her, a thin but vital barrier against the murderous cold. "He's coming!" one of the team members shouted, his voice laden with panic. Dr. Elias, with chilling calm, gave the order, "Don't shoot, not now!" "He's furious, he could be even more dangerous. Paramedic, keep doing what you're doing. Mendez, prepare your men for a barrier." The lion advanced, its eyes fixed on the paramedic. But before it could take more than a few steps toward him, Jorge, with renewed courage, shouted, "Hey, lion, over here! There's more!" And with a desperate movement, he threw a small piece of meat he had kept in his pocket to the opposite side of the highway. The lion stopped, confused again. Its hunting instinct was boiling, but loyalty still pulled it toward the woman. The new bait, smaller but still tempting, made it hesitate. It was a game of life or death, of instinct versus emotion. While the lion was divided, the paramedic acted with lightning speed. He opened the thermal blanket, a silver sheet reflecting the emergency lights, and wrapped the caretaker. His agile fingers checked her pulse, her breathing. "She's very weak, Doctor. We need to get her out of here now." Dr. Elias nodded, his mind working at high speed. The lion was a few meters away, growling. Muscles contracted, ready for an attack. "We need an extraction plan. Mendez, we need a bigger distraction, something to draw him away long enough for us to get the woman to the ambulance." The sergeant, with adrenaline coursing through his veins, looked at his men. "Warning shots into the air. Keep him away, but don't shoot to hit." The shots echoed in the pre-dawn, tearing through the air and the lion's attention. The animal, startled by the sudden and thunderous noise, recoiled a few steps, its eyes wide, its tail lashing the air. It was a defensive reaction, not an attack. It was the chance. The paramedic, with the help of one of the officers, lifted the caretaker, now an inert bundle wrapped in the silver blanket. They ran toward the ambulance, which already had its doors open. The lion, confused and startled by the shots, watched the scene, its roar of fury mixed with a lament of loss. It had failed. They were taking her away. But as the caretaker was placed on the stretcher, a last, desperate effort from her dying body made her move her hand. Her pale, almost blue fingers reached out toward the lion, a weak, almost imperceptible gesture, and the lion, even from a distance, seemed to understand. It let out a roar that was not of anger, but of profound sadness and helplessness. The ambulance closed its doors, its revolving lights flashing, and sped away, taking with it the fragile life of the caretaker. The lion was left behind, alone on the highway, the scent of the meat forgotten. Her scent now, just a distant memory in the air. It had fulfilled its promise of protection, but not of salvation. And now, what would become of it? The caretaker's fate was in the hands of medicine, but the fate of the lion, the improbable guardian, was in the hands of the men who now surrounded it, with darts and nets ready to capture it. The silence that followed the ambulance's departure was heavier than any roar, a premonition of an uncertain future for the lion that defied logic for love. The distant rumble of the ambulance faded into the darkness, taking with it the only reason that lion was there. The silence that settled on the highway was heavy, filled only by the rustle of the wind and the accelerated beats of human hearts. The lion, once a fierce guardian, now seemed a statue of sadness and confusion. Its amber eyes, which moments before shone with protective fury, now carried a gleam of helplessness. Fixed on the spot where the woman had disappeared, it had failed in its final mission to keep her close, but it had fulfilled its promise to protect her until the last moment. Sergeant Mendez stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Containment team, advance. Tranquilizer darts ready. We don't want to hurt him, but we need to get him out of here safely." Adrenaline still coursed through everyone's veins, but the imminent danger of a furious attack had lessened, replaced by calculated caution. The lion no longer roared with anger, but with a deep lament, a sound that seemed to tear the very soul of the pre-dawn. Dr. Elias watched the scene, a lump tightening in his throat. That animal, wild and majestic, had demonstrated a loyalty and love that many humans would be incapable of feeling. "Jorge," he called, turning to the truck driver who remained standing, his eyes fixed on the lion. "You were incredibly brave. What you did saved her life." Jorge merely shook his head without taking his eyes off the feline. I couldn't stand by. He's not a monster, Doctor. He just wanted to help." The containment team, composed of veterinarians and wildlife specialists, began to approach, forming a semicircle. Nets were ready and rifles with tranquilizer darts were aimed. The lion, sensing the movement, recoiled a few steps, its muscles tense, but without the same aggression as before. It was a defensive posture of an animal cornered and exhausted, not of a predator seeking combat. It looked at each of them, as if trying to understand what was happening, why they were there, why they had taken her. One of the veterinarians, an experienced man with years of work in zoos, tried a softer approach. "Calm down, boy. We don't want to hurt you." His voice was gentle, but the lion didn't understand the words, only the intention. It let out a low growl, a warning, but without the strength of before. Its eyes swept the surroundings, searching for an exit, a path to the woman it had sworn to protect. But she was no longer there. The empty highway, her scent dissipating in the air, was a cruel reminder of its loss. "He's exhausted," Dr. Elias whispered to Mendez. "He probably hasn't eaten in days, and the adrenaline must be taking its toll." The team continued to advance, slowly, methodically. The lion, with nowhere to go, no one left to protect, let out a final roar, a cry of despair and surrender. It was not an attack roar, but one of profound sadness. It was the sound of a broken heart, of a guardian who had lost its purpose. The first tranquilizer dart hit the lion's flank with a soft puff. The animal flinched, turned its head to the impact site, confused. It felt no immediate pain, just a strange sensation. It staggered, its powerful legs beginning to fail. A second dart, and then a third were fired, ensuring the dose was sufficient for an animal of its size. In a matter of minutes, the lion, the majestic guardian of the highway, began to give way. Its eyes, once so alert, grew heavy. It tried to remain standing, but its legs no longer obeyed. With a low moan, it collapsed onto the cold asphalt, its enormous body falling with a dull thud. Dust briefly rose, and then silence returned, even deeper. The containment team approached quickly but cautiously. The veterinarian checked the lion's vital signs, confirming it was only sedated, breathing deeply. "He's fine. The tranquilizer will last a few hours." Jorge, the truck driver, felt a pang in his chest, seeing the inert lion. He had seen the fury, the loyalty, the sadness of that animal, and now it lay there vulnerable at the mercy of men. "What will happen to him?" Jorge asked, his voice hoarse. Sergeant Mendez replied, his expression serious. "He will be taken to a wildlife rehabilitation center. We'll assess his health and then decide what to do. We can't just release him back into the wild after an incident like this. It's dangerous for the public and for himself." Dr. Elias knelt beside the lion, hesitantly running his hand over its soft, thick fur. He felt the vibration of the sleeping body. "He's an extraordinary animal," the doctor said, more to himself than to others. "To act like this for a scent, for a memory, it's something that defies our understanding." As the team prepared a special stretcher to transport the lion, dawn began to give way to the first rays of sun. The highway, once the stage for an intense drama, now seemed strangely empty, as if the event had never happened. But the tire marks on the asphalt, the residual scent of meat and wild animal, and the memories etched in the minds of those who witnessed it told a different story. The story of a lion that loved, protected, and for that, lost its freedom. The caretaker's fate was now in the hands of medicine, fighting for life in a distant hospital. But the fate of the lion, the improbable guardian, was in the hands of the men, who now carried it to an uncertain future, far from the highway and the woman it had sworn to protect. Dawn painted the sky a deep purple, but the highway was still immersed in shadow, a silent stage for the drama that had just unfolded. The lion, now a sleeping giant, lay on the asphalt, its breathing deep and rhythmic, a contrast to the fury and desperation that had possessed it minutes before. The containment team acted with military precision, but with the reverence that an animal of that size inspired. A special, reinforced stretcher with raised sides was carefully positioned beside the feline. It required a coordinated effort from several men to lift the massive body and place it upon it. Every movement was slow, calculated, the silence broken only by the creak of the stretcher and whispered commands. Jorge, the truck driver, watched the scene with a lump in his throat. He had seen the soul of that animal, its unwavering loyalty. Now it was just an inert burden, carried by men who could not comprehend the depth of its gesture. Dr. Elias, beside him, seemed equally thoughtful. Science had its explanations for animal behavior, but what he had witnessed defied cold logic, touching something deeper, almost mythical. As the lion was carefully secured to the stretcher and prepared for transport, a specialized van with reinforced grills and adequate ventilation approached. The loading operation was tense. The fear that the animal might awaken, even minimally, hung in the air. But the tranquilizer was potent, and the lion remained in its deep sleep, oblivious to its uncertain fate. Once inside the van, the doors were sealed, and the vehicle departed, taking the highway guardian to a rehabilitation center. Meanwhile, kilometers away, the ambulance transporting the caretaker raced against time. The shrill sound of the siren tore through the dawn, announcing the imminent arrival of a life in danger. At the hospital, the emergency team was already on standby. The caretaker was urgently removed from the stretcher, her pale and fragile body, wrapped in the silver thermal blanket, appearing even smaller and more vulnerable. Weak and irregular pulse, dangerously low blood pressure, severe hypothermia and extreme dehydration, shouted one of the paramedics as they rushed her to the trauma room. Doctors and nurses moved with frightening efficiency, each knowing exactly what to do. Wires and tubes were connected to her body. Machines began to beep, monitoring every heartbeat, every breath. The fight for the caretaker's life had begun on a new battlefield. Dr. Elias, after giving his final instructions to Sergeant Mendez regarding the area cleanup and incident report, headed to the hospital. The highway, now empty and silent, seemed to have returned to its routine, but the tire marks and the residual scent of wild animal told a story the world would soon know. With the arrival of the sun, the news began to spread like wildfire. A wild lion on a busy highway, saving an unconscious woman. The story was so unbelievable that at first it was met with skepticism, but the accounts of the police officers, the paramedics, and especially Jorge, the truck driver, were consistent. Within hours, news helicopters hovered over the area. Reporters flocked to the gates of the hospital and rehabilitation center, eager for every detail. The incident was not just a news story. It was a phenomenon, an urban legend coming to life. At the rehabilitation center, the lion was transferred to a secure enclosure, adapted for its recovery. The chief veterinarian, Dr. Ricardo, a man with decades of experience with big cats, examined the sedated animal. He's exhausted, dehydrated, and has some superficial scratches, but overall, he's in good physical condition for what he's been through, he informed Dr. Elias, who had arrived to follow the case. The tranquilizer will begin to wear off in a few hours. We'll have to monitor him closely. Dr. Ricardo, Elias began, his voice low. His behavior, it's something I've never seen. He was protecting her. Because of her scent, he said. The scent of the caretaker who looked after him at the zoo. Dr. Ricardo frowned, thoughtful. It's extraordinary indeed. Olfactory memory in felines is incredibly powerful, but this intensity of loyalty, this devotion, is rare. even in animals that form bonds with humans. He paused, looking at the lion's imposing body. The question now is, what will we do with him? We can't release him. It's a danger to the public, and keeping him in captivity after this, it's a complex decision. At the hospital, the caretaker, whose name had finally been identified as Ana Lucia, was in critical but stable condition. Dr. Fernanda, the attending physician, left the trauma room to speak with Dr. Elias. "We managed to stabilize her, doctor, but she's very weak, and the shock was immense. We'll need time to see the extent of the damage. She has a pre-existing heart condition that was aggravated by dehydration and stress. It's a fight, but she's a warrior." Elias nodded, relieved, but still concerned. "And the lion, Dr. Fernanda. He saved her. It's unbelievable." "Unbelievable is an understatement, doctor," she replied, shaking her head. "But now the priority is Ana Lucia. She needs all the care possible." The sun was already high, illuminating the city and revealing the extent of the media frenzy. The story of the lion and the caretaker dominated the news, social media, conversations. The world was divided between astonishment, admiration, and fear. A wild animal had defied all expectations, driven by a love and a memory that transcended the species barrier. While Ana Lucia fought for her life in the hospital and the lion recovered from sedation in a secure enclosure, their fates were intrinsically linked. The highway, now clean, held the echoes of a protective roar and a lament of loss. The future was uncertain for the lion that had loved too much and for the woman who unknowingly had been saved by an unbreakable bond. The world waited, holding its breath, to see the outcome of this extraordinary story of love and instinct. The morning sun, once a herald of hope, now seemed only to illuminate the weight of uncertainty. At the rehabilitation center, the lion began to awaken. Its eyes, previously heavy with tranquilizer, blinked slowly, adjusting to the filtered light of the enclosure. Confusion was palpable in its gaze. The scent of disinfectant and metal, strange and oppressive, filled its nostrils, replacing the familiar aroma of asphalt, earth, and above all, the sweet, comforting scent that had guided it. It rose with difficulty, its legs still wobbly, its body heavy and sore. Its primary instinct, stronger than any sedative, urged it to search. It sniffed the air, head low, moving in slow circles. Where was she? Where was the scent that had awakened it, that had called it to protect her? The absence of that aroma, once so present, was a torment. A low, guttural growl escaped its throat, not of anger but of frustration and growing anxiety. It scratched the enclosure bars with a paw, a metallic screeching sound that echoed in the silence of the place. "Doctor." Ricardo observed the scene from a safe distance, his expression grave. The lion's behavior confirmed Dr. Elias's words. It was not just a wild animal, it was a being searching for something it had lost. The lion's agitation increased with each minute it failed to find what it sought. It began to pace back and forth, a frantic rhythm that revealed its silent despair. Its eyes, once confused, now displayed a disturbing intelligence, a relentless search. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Ana Lucia continued her battle. Dr. Fernanda emerged from the ICU with a tired but slightly optimistic expression. "She's had a minimal improvement, Dr. Elias. Her vital signs are a little more stable and the hypothermia is receding, but it's still a critical state. Her heart condition is a constant concern. Any stress could be fatal." Elias nodded, relief mixed with concern. "Is she conscious?" "Not completely. There were some reflex movements, a slight squeeze of my hand, but nothing to indicate full consciousness. It's a long road, doctor, but she's fighting." The news, though small, was a ray of light amidst the darkness, but Ana Lucia's fight was only one part of the equation. The fate of the lion, the improbable guardian, hung like a dark cloud. The media gave no quarter. Reporters camped at the hospital and rehabilitation center gates, demanding answers, speculating about the future of the hero lion. The pressure on authorities was immense. Dr. Elias, feeling the urgency to understand the depth of that bond, decided he needed to go to the source. The zoo, the place where it all began. "Dr. Ricardo," he said to the chief veterinarian, who had just arrived from the rehabilitation center, "I need to go to the old zoo. I need to understand this lion's history, Ana Lucia's history with him. We cannot make a decision about his future without understanding the root of this extraordinary behavior." Dr. Ricardo rubbed his temple. "It's a good idea. Doctor, perhaps there are records, former employees who can give us a clue. But time is crucial. The lion is growing more agitated by the minute. He needs something or someone, and we can't keep him like this indefinitely. Safety is a concern, and his well-being too." The tension was palpable. The lion, a symbol of strength and freedom, was now caged, its mind tormented by absence. Ana Lucia, a fragile woman, fought for her life, unaware of the sacrifice that had been made for her. And Dr. Elias, a man of science, found himself immersed in a story that defied all logic, driven by an intuition that cried out for answers. The trip to the zoo would not be easy. The place had been closed for years, abandoned, its facilities falling into ruin. But Elias knew that there, among the debris of a forgotten past, might be the key to unraveling the mystery, the key to understanding a lion's love, and perhaps the key to both their futures. He felt a shiver. The story was not just about a rescue, it was about a reunion that destiny, or something deeper, had orchestrated, and he was about to unearth the secrets of that reunion. The urgency of the situation weighed on Dr. Elias's shoulders as he drove to the old zoo. The morning sun, which had once seemed a herald of hope, now only illuminated the gravity of the task ahead. The highway, once the stage for an extraordinary drama, was silent and empty. But Elias's mind buzzed with images of the lion, the caretaker, and the inexplicable connection between them. He needed answers, and the abandoned zoo was the only place he could find them. The road to the zoo was a secondary path, increasingly pitted and overgrown with vegetation. As he approached, the landscape changed, revealing the first signs of abandonment. Rusty signs, fallen gates, and the silhouette of decaying structures emerged among the trees. The place, once a vibrant center of life and learning, now exuded an aura of forgottenness and melancholy. As he parked the car in front of the main gate, Elias felt a shiver. The entrance, once imposing, was covered with vines and faded graffiti. The scent of damp earth and mold hung in the air, mingling with a ghostly echo of wild animals that once inhabited it. He pushed the iron gate, which creaked in protest, and entered what seemed to be a forgotten kingdom. The interior of the zoo was a labyrinth of cracked paths and wild flower beds that had taken over everything. The cages, empty and rusted, seemed like monuments to a bygone era. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant sound of birds. Elias walked, his steps echoing in the desolation, searching for the big cat section, and more importantly, the old administrative building. He found the building after a few minutes, hidden among dense bushes. The windows were broken, and the wooden door hung from a rusty hinge. Inside, time had stopped. Overturned tables, papers scattered on the floor, and a thick layer of dust covered everything. The smell of old paper and dampness was strong. Elias began to rummage, hoping to find something, anything, that could shed light on the story of the lion and Ana Lucia. In a room that seemed to have been an office, he found a partially intact metal shelf. Among piles of dusty documents and moldy folders, he saw an archive box labeled Animal Registry Big Cats. With slightly trembling hands, he opened the box. Inside, there were yellowed paper cards, each detailing an animal's life. He searched for lions. Lee, he found it. A card with a photo of a young lion, its eyes curious and full of life. The name, written in elegant calligraphy, was Leo. The date of birth, origin, and a section for primary caretakers. And there it was, the name he sought. Ana Lucia Silva. The card detailed Ana Lucia's care routine with Leo, observations about the animal's behavior, and even small personal comments about the strong bond between the two. Leo shows great affection for Ana Lucia, responding to her call and seeking her presence. Read an annotation dated years ago. Elias felt a lump in his throat. It wasn't just a caretaker, it was the caretaker. The woman who had dedicated years of her life to caring for that animal, to building a bond of trust and love. The lion's olfactory memory was not just a recollection, it was the essence of a deep and lasting relationship. That lion, Leo, had recognized the scent of his human mother, his protector, his friend. With Leo's card in hand, Elias continued his search, now with renewed purpose. He wanted to see Leo's old enclosure. He found it not far from there, a concrete structure with rusted bars, now covered in moss and ivy. It was a large space, but still a prison. He imagined young Leo there, and Ana Lucia, entering with affection, talking to him, feeding him. The image was vivid, almost painful, as Elias absorbed the atmosphere of the place, the card in his hands. His phone vibrated. It was Dr. Ricardo from the rehabilitation center. "Dr. Elias, the lion is growing more agitated by the minute. He hasn't eaten anything and is growling at anyone who approaches. He seems to be in great distress. We can't keep him like this for much longer." Ricardo's voice was grave, and Elias felt the weight of urgency. "I'm coming back, Dr. Ricardo. I think I found what we needed. It's even deeper than we imagined." At the hospital, Dr. Fernanda observed Ana Lucia. The improvement was minimal, and the fight continued. The nurse beside her murmured, "Doctor, the media pressure is unbearable. They want to know about the caretaker, about the lion. The story is everywhere." Fernanda sighed. "Our priority is Ana Lucia. The rest can wait. But this woman, she has incredible strength, and a lion that loves her." Back at the abandoned zoo, Elias looked at Leo's card and the empty enclosure. The love of a lion, the devotion of a caretaker. The story was more than a rescue. It was a testament to an unbreakable bond, forged over years of affection and trust. He had the proof, the missing piece of the puzzle. But Ricardo's question echoed in his mind. What would they do with the lion? And would Ana Lucia survive to reunite with her guardian? The truth was powerful, but the future, now more than ever, remained a mystery to be unraveled. The drive back from the abandoned zoo was a blur of thoughts and emotions for Dr. Elias. The sun, now higher in the sky, could not dispel the shadow of urgency that weighed on him. Leo's card, carefully tucked into the passenger seat, was more than a yellowed piece of paper. It was irrefutable proof of a bond that defied human comprehension, a silent testament to years of affection and dedication. He felt his heart pound in his chest, a mixture of excitement at the discovery and dread at the implications. What would he do with this truth? How would he convince the world that the love between a lion and a caretaker could be the key to both their survival? Upon arriving at the rehabilitation center, the atmosphere was one of controlled chaos. Reporters clustered at the fences, microphones pointed at anyone who dared appear. The tension was almost palpable, a constant hum of anxious voices and camera flashes. Elias parked the car and rushed inside, finding Dr. Ricardo in the monitoring room, his face etched with concern. "Dr. Elias, thank goodness you're here," Ricardo began, his voice hoarse. "The lion is uncontrollable. He knocked over his water bowl, scratched the bars until his paws bled. We can no longer contain him without heavy sedation, and that could be dangerous for him. He's wasting away, Elias. It's not just agitation, it's despair." Elias placed Leo's card on the table, his eyes fixed on Ricardo's. "I know, Dr. Ricardo, and I know why." He pointed to the name Ana Lucia Silva in the caretaker's section. Ana Lucia wasn't just a caretaker, she was his mother, his protector, his friend. His name is Leo. He recognized her by her scent, Ricardo. He saved her because he loved her, and now he's dying of longing. Ricardo picked up the card, his eyes scanning the annotations, the comments about affection and connection. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the distant sound of Leo's muffled growls. Ricardo's scientific skepticism began to give way, replaced by astonished perplexity. It's unbelievable," he murmured, his voice almost inaudible. "His entire life, Ana Lucia. He lost her when the zoo closed, and now he found her again, only to see her disappear once more." "Exactly," Elias confirmed, the urgency in his voice growing. "He's not just agitated, he's grieving. He's searching for what he lost, and if we don't do something, he won't survive." Meanwhile, Fernanda called from the hospital. "Dr. Elias, Ana Lucia has had a slight regression. Her vital signs are unstable again, and her cardiac arrhythmia has intensified. She's fighting, but her body is exhausted. I don't know how much longer she can last in this state." The news hit Elias like a blow. The minimal improvement had been a false alarm. Time was running out for both of them. Elias's mind churned. Science, logic, everything he knew was being challenged by a primitive and unbreakable love. He looked at Leo's card, at the photo of the young lion, and an idea, crazy and dangerous, began to form in his mind. "Ricardo," he said, his voice firm, "we need to do something radical, something that goes against all protocols, but that might be the only chance for both of them." Ricardo raised an eyebrow, weariness and curiosity mixed in his gaze. "What do you have in mind, Elias? Sedate him and transfer him to a sanctuary. The media and authorities are pressuring us for a final decision." "No," Elias replied, shaking his head. "We need to bring him close to her, or bring her close to him. Her presence, her scent, is what he seeks, and perhaps, just perhaps, his presence is what she needs to fight." The silence that followed was deafening. Ricardo stared at him as if Elias had gone mad. "Are you serious? A wild lion in a hospital, or a critically ill patient with a fragile heart exposed to a predator? Elias, this is insane. The risks are immense. Ana Lucia's safety, her health. We could kill her. And what if the lion reacts badly? What if he hurts her?" "I know the risks, Ricardo," Elias retorted, his voice laden with desperation and conviction. "But what's the alternative? Let Leo die of sadness. Let Ana Lucia succumb to her condition, unaware that the animal she loved is here, fighting for her. He's not just any predator, he's Leo, the lion she cared for, the lion that saved her. He wouldn't hurt her, he would protect her." The idea was audacious, dangerous, and defied all medical and zoological logic. But Leo's agony, the growls echoing through the center, and Ana Lucia's fragility in the hospital were a testament to the depth of that bond. External pressure was overwhelming. Authorities demanded a quick solution for the hero lion that had become a problem. The media clamored for more details of the story, and the revelation of the bond between Ana Lucia and Leo would be explosive. "We need a plan," Elias continued, his voice calmer, but with unwavering intensity. We need a controlled environment, a prepared team. We can't just throw them together, but we need to try, Ricardo, for their sake, and to prove that there are bonds that science still cannot explain, but that can save lives. Ricardo ran a hand over his face, his eyes closed for a moment. He was a man of science, of reason, but there was something in Elias's conviction and in the lion's palpable pain that was shaking him. Elias, if this goes wrong, our careers and Ana Lucia's life will be on the line. The whole world will be watching us. And what if it works, Ricardo? Elias asked, his voice low, but full of hope. What if we prove that love can be the most powerful cure of all? That a lion can love a human with a devotion that transcends species? It's not just about Ana Lucia and Leo. It's about redefining what we think about life, connection, and empathy. The decision was monumental. Bringing a lion to a hospital, or a critically ill patient near a lion, was a madness bordering on irresponsibility. But the alternative, the slow, painful death of both, was even more unbearable. Elias knew he was about to propose something that would change the lives of everyone involved, and perhaps the world's perception of the relationship between humans and animals. The future, now more than ever, depended on a leap of faith, a desperate gamble on the strength of an unbreakable love. The silence in the room, previously heavy, was now merely a prelude to the storm of ideas and dilemmas that would follow. The arrival of Dr. Fernanda, with her red, tired eyes and choked voice, solidified the urgency. It was no longer a theory. It was a race against time, with Ana Lucia's life draining away with each irregular beat of her heart. Elias, with Leo's card still in hand, began to unfold the plan, his voice laden with a passion bordering on desperation. He spoke of the scent, of ancestral memory, of the animal grief that manifested in every one of Leo's roars. He spoke of Ana Lucia's regression, of her body's failure to respond to conventional treatments. It's not just an emotional connection, it's a physiological connection, he argued, looking from Ricardo to Fernanda. Extreme stress can kill, and love, hope, can be the most potent of medicines. Leo is dying of pain. Ana Lucia is dying of absence. The only chance, the only bridge to both their recovery is the reunion. Ricardo, the neurologist who until then clung to logic and science, felt the wall of his reason begin to yield. The evidence, though anecdotal and unprecedented, was there. Leo's deterioration, Ana Lucia's failure. Fernanda, the intensivist, nodded slowly. She had seen miracles and tragedies, and she knew that sometimes medicine needed a push from the inexplicable. "If she's fading, Elias," she said, her voice hoarse, "and if his presence can rekindle the flame, then we need to try. But how? Where? With every minute, the risk for her increases." The idea of a temporary, improvised sanctuary began to take shape. Elias pointed to a schematic map of the rehabilitation center. "We cannot move Ana Lucia to an animal enclosure. It's unfeasible and dangerous for her. But we can bring Leo to an environment adapted for him, one that is safe and sterile for her." Ricardo, with his analytical mind, was already visualizing the challenges. A disused wing of the hospital, he pondered, would be the most controlled option. We could reinforce the walls, install security barriers, ensure the necessary ventilation and sterility for Ana Lucia. But the stress for Leo would be immense, and the risk of infection for Ana Lucia, even with all precautions, is real. Fernanda, however, was already thinking about the equipment. We would need a complete portable ICU, monitors, ventilators, infusion pumps, and a dedicated nursing and medical team 24 hours a day. We cannot compromise her treatment even if it's to try something so unusual. The logistics were a nightmare, safety an absolute priority. We need a special transport cage for Leo, adapted for the indoor environment, Elias explained, and an animal containment team ready for any eventuality, however much I believe Leo won't harm her. He loves her. The next obstacle was the highest, approval. Who in their right mind would approve this? Ricardo asked, his voice full of skepticism. The ethics committee, the hospital board, animal control authorities. We would be ridiculed or worse, sued if something went wrong. We need an irrefutable argument, Elias replied, his mind already formulating the strategy. It's not just about love, Ricardo. It's about the physiology of stress and recovery. Grief in animals, especially in social species like lions, can lead to death. Ana Lucia's absence is killing Leo. And Leo's absence, the absence of his emotional anchor, is preventing Ana Lucia from fighting. It's a last resort intervention based on clinical and behavioral observation to save 2 lives. Dr. Fernanda, who had just come off an exhausting shift, felt a new surge of adrenaline. We need to speak with Dr. Almeida, the hospital director. He's conservative, but he's also a man who values life above all else. If we can present a detailed plan with all safety and contingency protocols, perhaps he will consider it. The meeting with Dr. Almeida was tense. The hospital conference room, usually a stage for discussions about budgets and new technologies, was now the setting for a proposal that challenged the very foundation of modern medicine. Elias, Ricardo, and Fernanda together presented their case. Elias spoke of Leo's card, of the change in his behavior, of Ana Lucia's regression. Ricardo detailed the medical risks and the precautions that would be taken. Fernanda explained Ana Lucia's critical situation and the lack of response to conventional treatments. Dr. Almeida, a man with graying hair and a serious demeanor, listened in silence, his eyes sweeping over the faces of the 3 professionals. He was a man of science, of protocols, of responsibility. The idea of a lion in his hospital was, for him, the epitome of madness. "You are asking me to authorize a circus," he finally said, his voice calm but with unquestionable authority. "You are asking me to risk a patient's life, the safety of my staff, and the reputation of this institution based on a feeling? On a love story between a caretaker and a lion?" "It's not just a feeling, Dr. Almeida," Elias retorted, his voice firm. "It's an observation. It's the last hope. Ana Lucia is dying. Leo is dying. If we don't try, their deaths will be on our hands, knowing there was a chance, however remote. And what if it works, Dr. Almeida? What if we prove that connection, empathy, love can transcend species barriers and save lives? Wouldn't that be a redefinition of what we think is possible in medicine?" Dr. Almeida closed his eyes, massaging his temples. The external pressure, the media still clamoring for news of the hero lion, was one factor. The internal pressure, that of saving a life, was even greater. He thought of Ana Lucia's eyes, whom he had visited, of her fragility. He thought of the image of the lion, so noble and powerful, who had risked its own life for her. "We need an impeccable security plan," he said, opening his eyes. "Every detail, every contingency, and we need Ana Lucia's family's consent. Without that, there's no discussion." Ana Lucia's family, already exhausted and desperate, was informed. At first, the idea was met with shock and disbelief, but faced with Ana Lucia's constant deterioration and the conviction of Elias, Ricardo, and Fernanda, they clung to that last improbable hope. "If it's the only chance," Ana Lucia's sister said, tears streaming, "then do it. Do whatever it takes to bring her back." With the family's approval and Dr. Almeida's reluctant green light, the machine began to move. A disused wing on the hospital's ground floor, with direct exterior access, was chosen. Engineering and security teams began working against the clock, reinforcing walls, installing bulletproof glass barriers, creating an environment that could be sterile for Ana Lucia and safe for Leo. A multidisciplinary team of doctors, nurses, veterinarians, and animal behavior specialists was assembled, all aware of the mission's magnitude and risk. Meanwhile, Leo at the rehabilitation center continued to waste away. His roars had turned into low moans, his energy draining. He felt her absence with every fiber of his being. And Ana Lucia, in her hospital bed, floated on the edge of consciousness, her body fighting a battle her mind seemed to have given up on. The stage was set for the most extraordinary reunion in history. A lion and a woman, separated by species and by illness, but united by a bond that defied everything. The future was not just uncertain, it was an audacious gamble on the strength of an unbreakable love, about to be tested at the very limit of life and death. Time, which had once seemed to drag in agonizing slowness, now raced at dizzying speed. Every second was a threatening tick-tock for Ana Lucia and a painful beat in Leo's heart. The disused hospital wing, once silent and forgotten, buzzed with the urgency of a beehive. Engineers and technicians worked alongside the medical team, transforming a sterile space into an improbable sanctuary. Walls were reinforced with steel, bulletproof glass panels were installed, creating a transparent and impenetrable barrier between the wild world and the fragile hospital bed. Ventilation was meticulously controlled, sterility obsessively maintained. It was a race against death, where science and hope intertwined in an audacious plan. Outside, the media camped, hungry for any crumb of information about the hero lion and the caretaker it had saved. But within those walls, the only concern was life. Elias, Ricardo, and Fernanda supervised every detail, their faces etched with fatigue, but their eyes lit by unwavering determination. Ana Lucia's portable ICU was meticulously set up, its monitors flashing at a constant yet worrying rhythm. Her body, once so vibrant, was now a pale canvas of fragility, each breath an effort, each heartbeat a reminder of the battle she was fighting. At the rehabilitation center, Leo was prepared for the journey. His roar, once a thunder, was now a hoarse lament, an echo of his pain. He refused to eat, his eyes fixed on a distant point, as if searching for something he had lost. The veterinary team administered a mild sedative, enough to calm him for transport, but not to extinguish the flame of his consciousness. The special, reinforced and adapted transport cage was a symbol of the strange duality of the situation, a wild animal being taken to a human hospital. Elias stroked Leo's muzzle through the bars, feeling the faint vibration of the lion's body. "We're going home, boy," he whispered, his voice choked. To her. The journey to the hospital was tense. Leo's cage was carefully loaded into an adapted vehicle, escorted by security teams. Upon arrival, an animal containment team was on standby, ready for any unforeseen event. Although Elias had unwavering faith in Leo's gentle nature toward Ana Lucia, the lion, still groggy but with a sharpened primal instinct, seemed to feel the change in the air, a proximity it yearned for. Inside the adapted wing, the tension was palpable. Ana Lucia lay in her bed, her vital signs dangerously fluctuating. Fernanda adjusted the monitors, Ricardo observed with grim seriousness. Elias stood beside the glass barrier, his heart pounding in his chest. The moment of truth had arrived. Leo's cage was slowly maneuvered into the adjacent room, separated from Ana Lucia only by the bulletproof glass. The air in the room seemed to vibrate. Leo, still a little dazed, raised his head. His eyes, previously opaque, began to focus. He inhaled deeply, and then a tremor ran through his massive body. It was the scent, her scent, the scent of the caretaker who loved him, who cared for him, who was his anchor in the world. A low, deep moan escaped his throat, different from any roar or lament he had emitted before. It was a sound of recognition, of relief, of a pain that was beginning to dissipate. He stood, staggering slightly, and approached the glass barrier, his large golden eyes fixed on the fragile figure in the bed. At the same instant, in the portable ICU, Ana Lucia's monitors began to change. A small, almost imperceptible alteration in her heart rate, a subtle movement in her fingers. The medical team watched in silent shock. Leo pressed his muzzle against the glass, a gesture of tenderness that defied his wild nature. He didn't roar, didn't scratch. He just remained there, his presence imposing, yet incredibly gentle. And then it happened. A tear trickled from the corner of Ana Lucia's eye. Her lips, previously pale and still, moved. An almost inaudible whisper escaped. Leo. It was a miracle. Not a religious miracle, but a miracle of connection, of the physiology of love. Ana Lucia's vital signs began to stabilize. Her breathing, previously shallow, became deeper. Leo's presence, his scent, his sight had ignited a flame that conventional medicine could not reach. In the days that followed, Leo remained there, a silent guardian. He slept near the glass, waking with every movement from Ana Lucia. She, in turn, began a slow but steady recovery. Each day, a little more strength returned to her body. She spoke to him through the glass, told him stories, and Leo responded with deep purrs and gentle gazes. The medical team documented every progress, every anomaly, every moment that defied logic. Dr. Almeida, who had been so reluctant, now observed the scene with silent admiration. He had witnessed the redefinition of medicine, proof that love, empathy, and connection could be the most potent of medicines. Ana Lucia recovered. It was not a quick process, but it was complete. Leo also regained his vigor, his roar returning with all its majesty. Their story became a legend, a testament to the strength of an unbreakable bond. Leo did not return to the zoo. A special sanctuary was built for him, where Ana Lucia could visit him, where they could continue to share their love, separated only by a barrier that no longer mattered. The caretaker and the lion. The lion that saved its caretaker, not just on the highway, but also on her deathbed, a story that echoed the deepest truth of existence, that the connection between living beings, regardless of species, can transcend all barriers, defy all expectations, and in the end, save lives. The future, which was once an audacious gamble, was now a living testament to the incalculable power of love.